So, what are your books, The Dragon and the Crow, about, and how'd you come up with this idea?
So Dragon and the Crow is it's set in a kind of shape-shifting universe. The magic system is entirely based on vows that the magic users have with either gods or with magical creatures, or just like sort of prime examples of specific creatures that they can then draw those powers into their own body. And there's a whole sort of hard magic system to it about, runes and armor and magic items and stuff. But the idea came up because I got invited to another anthology called Reign of Dragons, which was a bunch of mostly indie authors. Andy Peliquin's in there. Jasmine Young was one of the organizers. JDL Roselle, a lot of guys who you've heard of and follow. And I was the only rule was that it had to be something to do with dragons. And everything I've written up to that point did not involve dragons. In fact, I would almost say I've explicitly left dragons out of my worlds. Not really intentionally, but just they're such a very common trope
Yeah.
that I've kind of steered around them. And so I always love coming up with new ideas. That's kind of how I got into this entire thing. And so I sat down and started tinkering around with what kind of dragon story I wanted to tell. And very early on, I was like, dragon knights interest me. Like, but that's a very typical sort of dragon rider motif where you have a knight on a dragon. And I didn't quite want to go in that direction. And so I came with this idea of the shapeshifters, where you've got, a guy who can become a dragon. He's the knight that is a dragon. But there's also like mid forms and other abilities and stuff. And I thought, well, it'd be interesting if he was the last one. Um, and so the short story I wrote, I just released as a prequel called Night of the Worm. And I'm not going to spoil the short story. It's got a lot of betrayal and intrigue and stuff in it. But um, basically, I wanted to create this guy who was unintentionally a dragon knight. It wasn't what he set out to do, but it's what happened. Um, and there's another. I don't talk bad about other books, but there was a book that came out a while back that very heavily featured crow motifs, and I'm a big fan of crows. My imprint is called Citizen Crow. I am surrounded by crows right now. Crows are a big part of it. My very first book, Heart of Veridon, no, um, the short story that inspired my very first book, Heart of Veridon, came from a short story about a guy who has a cloak that is also a murder of crows. It turns into crows.
That's cool.
Uh, and his dad was murdered for the technology that created that, and his dad hid himself, the ghost of himself, in that cloak. And so the image of that, of a man becoming a bunch of crows, was sort of central to, has been part of my imagination for a long time. So the main character in Dragon the Crow was a knight of crows. He's a guy whose magic power is to become a murder of crows. That's one of his powers. Um, and he's tasked with certain things, and is kind of a spy and an assassin and stuff. And he then becomes a knight of dragons. And so he's both of these things. And so sort of the tension between that serving two gods and what the dragons intend for him to do and what the crows intend for him to do, like how that plays out. Uh, that short story served as the character creation process, basically for the world, but also for the main character. And then when I was done, I'm like, well, I want to continue telling this story. And ironically, I wrote the first book, The Last Dragon Knight, before the short story came out, before the anthology released. And so I think I released that in January of last year. And my plan was to write three books last year in this series. And then other projects intervened. I only got one of them out. Um, and so I did write book two, and it comes out. I don't know when this airs exactly, but it's coming out next week, Monday.
Oh,
So I'm hoping that uh, you know I'm able to continue it. It's one of those things where I have things I'm contracted for and things that I feel obligated to do, other projects that I want to finish. So I'm going to sort of be continuing this Dragon and Crow series, but it's not my top priority, unfortunately. Like I really enjoy it, but um, I want to finish Wraithbound. I want to finish the Bladecaster stuff, uh, and all of that is is higher in my queue right now than book 3 of Dragon and Crow. So, but book 2 is coming out.